Hello, I'm here with Dr. Jay Watts, a consultant, clinical psychologist and a psychotherapist. Wow, you've got a vast number of roles, so tell us, what are you hoping to achieve?
Well, I'm lucky enough to spend my days listening to women. What we've realised, a number of us are getting together for a movement to really change psychiatric services. At the moment, if women are in trouble, often they get diagnosed and labelled as having disordered personalities and seen as kind of like bad people. And that produces all sorts of problems. So, for example, we've got kind of many situations where a woman will self-harm, they'll cut themselves, they go into accident and emergency and they get stitched up without anaesthetic because of the idea they're doing these things to be manipulative. What we found out and what we know from listening to survivors is that actually very, very often if people are having trouble, it's a result of trauma. And so there's a movement led by psychiatric survivors, supported by professional allies, basically going enough with diagnosis, the one fit all boxes don't work, they silence women, and what we're arguing for is something called trauma-informed care. And that's based on really looking at all the situations in life, early environments, and how what are seen as psychiatric symptoms are often just very understandable reactions that we need to listen to and not judge and not label.
So how do you think personalities are formed?
It's a kind of fascinating question. Personalities start getting formed before we're even born. So people tend to kind of have an idea of what a baby is going to be like. And sometimes say if a baby, kicks a lot in the womb, then parents will already start talking and say, oh, they're going to be like their Aunt Mabel or whatever it might be. So we're born already kind of bathed in language and ideas of what we're going to be like. And when we're very, very small, in the early years that are so crucial, we kind of take cues from the environment, we take cues on how safe early caregivers make us feel, and we also kind of pick up messages from society, gendered messages, cultured messages about what we are, and certain bits of those kind of get reinforced and praised, and other bits get seen sometimes as deviant and troublesome. So kind of the idea of personality, it's a kind of sort of shorthand that really can get very troubled or shattered or shaken by traumatic experiences that we have early on. And those can be kind of big things that are very obvious traumas like childhood sexual abuse, or they can be very, very damaging kind of pernicious things, like, for example, having caregivers who don't allow us the space to kind of develop as individuals and don't validate our journey, which kind of shakes up the sense of self. At the same time, it's kind of super important to kind of realise that personality, it's a very, very recent idea in history, and it's also a very Western idea. So it's kind of something that seems natural, but that actually kind of is a construct that is very specific to this moment. And there is also like super exciting research coming in showing that actually personality changes a lot more across the lifespan than people thought. And I think that's quite exciting, really.
So tell us then, what do you think causes a personality disorder?
I think it's a kind of fascinating question. There's a problem with personality disorders. Me and many, many others actually question whether they exist. And this is becoming such a big thing. The science around the ideas of personality disorders is so dodgy that even the biggest, kind of most conventional psychiatric Bible was almost going to reject the whole category of personality disorders until the very last minute. So we know that's going to be an idea that's going to go. What I hope will emerge instead is to move away from pathologising women, especially given the fact that we know categories like borderline personality disorder, it's 3 out of 4 women in psychiatric services, and a massive amount of these women would have experienced trauma such as childhood sexual abuse. So I'm hoping kind of the wider cultural understandings of trauma mean that all of us are going to actually turn around to psychiatric services and say enough with telling people, especially women, that they're disordered. Let's actually listening to stories, and let's actually ask people what has happened to them, and also kind of what kind of structural oppressions, how things like misogyny and racism and poverty actually kind of create madness and shape madness, rather than putting all the fault into individuals.
So tell us, Dr. J, where do you stand on nurture versus nature debate?
It's another fascinating question. I think we have to be super careful about setting them up against one another. So we know that there are temperamental differences between babies, but they tend to be massively kind of over-exaggerated and seen as much more significant than they are. So even if there are things like genetic phenotypes, those only really get kind of switched on if we're in certain environments. So rather than nature versus nurture, we kind of really need to think about how they interact. But at the same time, we have to be kind of super careful because people tend to think if there are any kind of nature temperament elements, that those are kind of sort of bad things, that they are deviances, that they are psychopathologies. And actually, really, they're just kind of forms of difference. So, for example, with the idea of personality disorder, some people try to connect it with a trait of increased emotional sensitivity. And that is used by people, and this is so dangerous, to kind of really produce an idea that, say a woman has been, sexually abused all the way through childhood, that if they hadn't been emotionally sensitive, then they wouldn't have gone mad. And that is bad science. It's very dangerous, and it's something that we need to be aware of so we can pick up on.
So how do you believe people can change their behaviour patterns for the better?
I think there are three things that are really important. The first of which is that it's absolutely crucial to try and have an environment that supports us. So trying to find as good enough an environment is the first thing. Second thing that is super important is to really find ways to what our psychologists call positively reinforce or underline or celebrate any behavioural change that we do make. But the last thing that I think that really matters is to recognise that those self-improvement and psychology, in fact, can really kind of make the difference and be so freeing and enriching for us. Also, there are some situations where behavioural change is near damn impossible. So, for example, if you're a woman and you don't know if you're going to get your benefits that week, and you're not sure whether you're going to have enough food to live on, actually to kind of feel under a kind of tyranny of self-improvement that one should be able to kind of do positive behavioural change, that can be another way of beating ourselves up. So I think we need to recognise that behavioural change isn't always possible in some environments, and free ourselves really from all responsibility for always kind of sort of being in a good mind place, as it were.
Thank you so much, Dr. J. That was amazing. Great tip that you've given us today, and I'm sure lots of viewers will really benefit from it. Now it's back to you at the studio.